At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'll have a story up Saturday, I guess today, on Jayden Daniels and how he leads the NFL in touchdown passes that have a completion probability percentage of 30% or less. Did you get that? In other words, he comes through on some of the toughest throws. He actually has 5 that have a 30.4% chance for completion or less. He has 5 of those, 4 under 30%, leads the NFL. So pretty impressive stat by him. So I went through each of those and kind of explained why, et cetera. So read that on ESPN.com. Also some programming notes. We'll be back after the game, Sunday's game against the Giants, with a review of the game and what happened, talking about the game. So that will be up Sunday night, both in the podcast and on YouTube. And then I'm going to try something a little bit different with my game reviews this week for Tuesday. And just going to be doing like plays of the week and just kind of have different categories, not just a straight review, but just some different things that I learned from rewatching the game, but not just a straight game review. So anyways, hopefully that's something that more of you guys would want to tune in for. Also, if you have a predicted score for this game, leave it on the YouTube comments. I'm curious what you think and how you feel about this team going into this game. So give me your predictions. And hey, if you nail it, I'm going to talk about it on the air and give you some props. So leave me the score and why you think that the score will be that way. So listen, folks, I think this is going to be a close game because it always is, typically is against the Giants. And it's not like they were just blew them out and ran them off the field in the first game. They are a better team than that week as well. So anyways, we'll get into all this in my 5 things I think. And it's, as you know, it's not just about the game. It's about other aspects of this team and other players on this team and just things that you pick up during the week that I think you'll be interested in. So anyways, without further ado, here we go. So the first thing is, I think Jayden Daniels is extremely mature. And I think you see it the way he handles himself after a game like he had on Sunday with that game-winning play. I mean, first of all, on the field, for a couple of seconds, I'm not sure he really, maybe he just kind of froze. Not sure that he really was able to process. Then he go crazy a little bit. But by the time you get in the locker room, he's already come down off that. And it's funny because he had people on within the team and all that, just kind of ribbing him for, hey, you threw it 5 yards short of the end zone or little things like that. Like one of the things that you pick up on with him is he likes that kind of ribbing and back and forth because he gives it out just as much as he might get it. Probably gives it out more because how many times do you really have a chance to rib him about things? But what he also likes to do is he doesn't want to just hear how great he was. He will look at the plays that he missed. He will want to hear about the throws that he could have done better, the plays he could have done better, whatever it is. So that's something that I think is very mature. And it's why you hear guys say he's not like a rookie. And Zach Ertz has said that a number of times. Coaches have said that as well. There's a maturity to him that helps him move from point A to point B after games like this. It's how he's been throughout his career. If you listen to Ryan Porter, his private quarterbacks coach, I had him on Thursday. If you listen to that one, you would understand why he is the way he is. And if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it because it's pretty good. Some really good insight into somebody that you're going to want, that you're obviously going to want to learn more about over however many years he's here. Anyway, but I do think like right after the game, he was getting ribbed on a couple things, or just like, hey, pointing out like, hey man, you missed this many throws or you did this. And it's good natured, but again, that's what he likes to hear. And I think it's why he's going to be good for a long time, because he doesn't want to just hear you're the best, you're this, you're that. He does want to be coached. He wants to get better. The goal here for him, again, I've said this before, it's not to be 6-2, it's to come here and win and to be really good. And you don't get that way by going in there and just basking in the glow. Now, I think a game like that, you would kind of understand everybody on Sunday night feels pretty good, as they should have. But how do you move on? And if you don't move on quickly, then I think you're in trouble. So, and it's funny because one of the things, this is a little bit of a segue here, or a little bit of a swerve here within the Jaden Daniels portion, but I think this is a mature team. You've heard me talk about that a lot, but I'm an Ohio State guy, and Terry McLaurin's an Ohio State guy. And one of the things I remember talking to him about in 2019, after he got here, is after I got to know him, like, what the hell happened to you guys against Iowa in 2018? And they went there, they had this big win over Penn State, and they went there, Iowa, and they should have won big, and they got their butts kicked. And he said the big problem with that was they were still talking about that game on Wednesday within the team. They're not sitting there, like, we're asking questions about some aspects of that game, that play, whatever, but I don't think the team is sitting there dwelling on it. And so I think that's a difference here but when you have a quarterback like this, if Jaden Daniels was sitting there living in that, basking in that glow for a couple of days, I think there'd be a problem. That's not how he operates. It's on to the next for him. And when he says that, he genuinely means it, because that's his process. So that's a big plus for them in the locker room. It's funny because even in the locker room, I told you before, but he's a very vocal presence, and he and Bobby Wagner get along really well. A lot of basketball back and forth, but he's always in there. And I think I'd be curious to see how, as he grows as a player and becomes more, just more and more, famous, or at a higher level, whatever it is, how does that continue? And I don't think it's going to change for him, because it seems like he likes all aspects of football, and part of that is being in that locker room. Anyways, number two, I think Dan Quinn is a guy that these guys like to play for, in part because of this reason: trash talking. How's that? So if you remember, there was a play that Terry McLaurin had with Tyreek Stevenson, where after a catch, Stevenson got up and said something, and McLaurin basically told him back, and you could read the lips, said, "You ain't shit." And excuse my language, but that's what he said back to him. And it's funny because Terry McLaurin is not really a trash talker. He is highly competitive, though. And if you're going to come at him in a game where it's competitive, he is going to come back at you, not so much as a trash talker, but as a competitor. To me, there's a difference. Trash talkers are constant. And we asked him the other day who the best trash talker he's gone up against. It's Jair Alexander. He said no matter what the situation is, he's always talking trash. Some people only talk it when things are going well. Some of them may play corner for the Giants, and maybe, I guess you probably take that one to the bank. But some people do it when they're doing well, or maybe when they have help on their side, like not when it's a one-on-one situation. Like he said, Alexander just talks the entire time, no matter what. And I think he kind of likes that, because it's like, you don't let up, and it's just, this is who he is. But the key here is how Dan Quinn has embraced that for them, and how not just lets him do it, but he doesn't. Some coaches may not want guys to do a lot of that because they're worried about the penalty, they're worried about this or that. With Quinn, he said that he came up to him on the sideline after all that and put his arm around him, just basically referred to, "You're a dog." In a nutshell, he's like, "You're a dog." And he loves that stuff. Like, Quinn, I think, encourages that. And McLaurin was saying that the Dallas defense under him, he said they were all like that. They were all nonstop, all talk, and they backed it up. But they played a certain way, and I think because of that, that philosophy, or coach embracing that ability to do that, I think it allowed them to just have a little bit more fun, and maybe just be more of who they are. And football is a game where you can talk, but McLaurin was saying, like, all their entire defense would be talking and only like one or two guys on Washington would be talking. And it's got to be kind of weird. I wouldn't say intimidating, but it's certainly, if you have a defense that's talking like that, what is their belief that leads them to do that? So now they have a couple guys here, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, like those guys are here now. They have a lot of energy on that defense. And I think that translates very well. But it goes back to me, Dan Quinn embracing that ability or that desire for players to be that way. And if you don't have that, and if some guys want to express themselves in that way, and you have to be careful because there is a line, like they haven't had any issues with it. So you haven't seen any issues with it. But if you start to, like, there's a difference between being undisciplined, but also a trash talker, right? And not that you just go, you trash talk, but you're not, I think what he liked about the McLaurin one is not so much that he's talking trash, is that you don't back down. That's the whole thing. And I think that's maybe a better way to put it, is not backing down versus, because in that instance, it wasn't about trash talking. And you do say something that's an insult. That's more about not backing down. Like, guy gets in your face, don't back down. There's no penalty, no threat of a penalty. It was just a boom, gone, right? Now, if you start pushing, you start doing that stuff, now you have an issue. So that's when you have to walk the line as a coach and just decide, like, what do you want your players to be able to, what are you going to allow them to get away with? But again, if you're just expressing yourself and you're out there playing hard, and the best way to show that is by playing hard, that's what they're doing right now. They're playing hard, they're playing physical. With that comes a lot of confidence and just not cockiness, but just a strong belief in what you're doing and letting people know it. And I think that's, they certainly are enjoying that for sure. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. So
hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, the John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to the Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts. And many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
Number 3, I think Johnny Newton and Phidarian Mathis, Phil Mathis, however you want to do it. He says to call him either one. So Phidarian Mathis, I think those guys are being a big help. And we know that what Johnny Newton did last week, had coming off his best game. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him first. So that one of the things he said that, and I talked to him for several minutes this week, a lot of others did too. I had talked to him just by myself for a few minutes. One of the things he said is that first sack that eventually was ruled a sack, but it was initially a tackle for loss, gave him a lot of confidence. And it's funny because it wasn't like it's a screen pass. So you are getting in there. They're going to let you in, right? So you're not running to the ball, but it really more or less what he said is it settled him down and provided him that confidence and allowed him. Once you get that, you start to settle. Like, that's what these guys want. They want to get those sacks, and you don't want to just hunt sacks, because when you start hunting sacks, then it becomes a problem for the whole line. And we've seen that here in the past. Guys would hunt sacks, and you're not playing as a group or as a unit, and you give up big plays as a result, or you give, the rush lanes are undisciplined, et cetera. And becomes a problem. But when you get that, it can settle you down. And that's certainly what it did for him there. And, he feels like he's playing faster. And it's funny because I thought he took a jump from the Panthers game to this one. And part of it is just making plays. Part of it is now he's been on the field a lot. He was a high pick. I mean, I think some people thought he might go in the first round. Like, this is a talent. So it's not like it's a surprise that he started to make plays. He just needed reps and experience. And now he's got a lot more games he's got 7 games under his belt now. That makes a difference. And now they need him to do more with John Allen out. The other thing is that he's getting used to the speed of the linemen as well, and especially their hands. So that's an adjustment that he gets used to, but he's doing that, and it allows him to play. He feels like he's able to win a little bit better because of that. So that's a big thing. But the funny thing is, I asked him what was his favorite play in the game, because sometimes they may make a play that it's not the splash play that becomes their favorite play because of what it highlighted. And there is one that he definitely said. It was a 2-yard stop of DeAndre Swift. And here's why that was big. It's because of how he took on the double team. And one of the things that he struggled with a little bit was taking on some of those double teams. He's gotten better and better, but he said it's really about forming habits from practices to walkthroughs to games, practice, walkthrough games, and getting used to playing them a certain way so you know how to do it. And it sounds simple, why he did it well, but it's still something that took him a little bit to get used to because the tendency is maybe to attack the double team, maybe try to split the double team. What they want him to do is attack one person. And on the play where he stops DeAndre Swift, you have both he and Deron Payne are being doubled, and you see Deron Payne doing it the same way. He attacks one guy. So attack one guy and don't just try to beat two. You don't have to beat two guys. So on this play, he attacks the center. The right guard starts to block down and goes to him, but he's engaged with the center. So the right guard goes then thinking that the center has him, then goes to the linebacker, and then Newton sheds the center and gets to the ball carrier and tackles him for a 2-yard loss. That was his favorite play of the game because, again, it shows the technique. It was him responding to the coaching and the way what they want to do with it, and taking what you learn in the practice field to the game. And consistent habits develop consistent players on the field. That's why I think that's why he said that play mattered to him so much, is because of all those factors. The other stuff, you can make a play, that it's a talented thing, but when you did something right like that, that's not always something that's going to get you. The 2-yard stop is not going to get you the highlight play, the sack, the fumble recovery. Those get you on the highlights. This one, though, wins you a lot of praise from teammates and coaches because you did it the exact right way. Because you could make a play on some of those other ones and maybe have played the wrong technique. You just get in the right spot. This one, it worked because of how he played it. And then you got Fedarian Mathis too. And it's funny because I didn't have him on the final roster. And I thought it'd be either he or John Ridgway. Well, they traded Ridgway, so then it naturally that Mathis was going to make it at that point. Until then, I thought Ridgway, for the first few weeks of camp, he was working ahead of him. I felt he was better than him at that point. And then midway through, something just seemed to switch for Mathis. And you start to see him okay, he's starting to show up more. And I think it was like the last preseason game, maybe, or the second one, where he's starting to show up more. And you saw that more in practice as well. And you're starting to see it more and more in games. And big part of it was that initially he was doing a lot of things. We're just trying to get a feel, or maybe not so much. Listen, he's a big fella, so he's not a finesse guy, but he was playing more of a finesse game maybe, and trying to use speed to get up there. But what they really wanted from him is to be big, and they told him, play big, be a big guy, and that's what he's doing. And you see it now. He's harder to move. He's playing over the center. He's making stops or making plays, helping others make plays because of that. And I think that's a big key for him. And if those two continue to develop like that, now you have a good rotation inside with John Allen out. So that's been a good development for them for sure. Number 4, I think the communication has been really good the last couple of weeks, and it's not just Bobby Wagner. But I think this is a key part to any defense playing well, especially when you have more and more teams going up tempo, no huddle, et cetera, because that, Washington does it. And I've talked about this, where part of the reason the Commanders do it is, first of all, you have a quarterback who can handle it. All right. And then they go into different formations, but it forces a defense to communicate well, test their communication skills. So you can go no huddle, give them a look, motion out of it, test their ability to communicate. Do all these guys get it? You can go no huddle and run, as we talked about last week, run the unbalanced lines. Do they all get it? Maybe a few guys adjust, but do they all see it? Do they all get the adjustment? Because if you don't, now you got a big cutback lane. And that's what was happening. So you see that. So that's why, and it's also regulate the defense. But what Washington did really well last week, and I think this is a credit to their ability to communicate, is when the Bears would be in those situations where they wanted to go no huddle to try and regulate the defense, get them into a static coverage, right? That they were able to continue to switch up and succeed because of their communication skills. It's Bobby Wagner, it's Jeremy Chin, but it's also others in the secondary as well. So there were a couple of times where you'd see Chin and Bobby Wagner would communicate late in a snap because something may have changed. So you got to turn and communicate, and they get it and they relay it, and boom, you go make a play. So, but the other thing is, I give credit to the secondary as well, because they had a hard time against Baltimore with doing that. And so initially it would be verbal calls, right? Verbal calls with some hand signals, some. That's a key point. So some hand signals, verbal calls, you need to acknowledge it so you can pat your helmet, maybe pat your side to acknowledge that you got it. Then they moved on to, okay, sometimes guys, as Quan Martin told me a couple weeks ago, sometimes guys are just really locked in and they may not hear it because they're so locked in on their assignment or their guy, whatever it is. So you shout out their names. All right. So you get their attention by doing that. But does that get to everybody? So what you've seen more and more, and especially last week, are the hand signals. So now they have hand signals for all these defensive calls. That also makes a difference. And I saw it a couple times last week where Mike Samerstill and Noah Benagany in particular, where there may be a late motion. I see Samerstill motioning to Benagany, who then gestures back. And it's funny because this time the Bears motion to a bunch, late motion to a bunch formation, and the defensive backs handled it perfectly because of the communication. So when you get that, now you can cut down on your mistakes. And there were a couple times in that first Giants game where I felt like that was a little bit of an issue with Malik Neighbors. There are some other bigger issues for sure against him, but a couple times, but the Ravens game for sure. But since then, it's been better, and they've worked to improve that. And we know what Bobby Wagner puts into it. And Joe Witt was talking about how, he's in there, or maybe it's Dan Quinn or Joe Witt talking about how Wagner's in there so early on a Tuesday watching the film, and he'll bring the other linebackers in, and that doesn't always happen here where you get the groups watching a film. There have been some years where these groups do not watch together because it's just not that kind of a team. You don't have that kind of leader in the room. And when you do have that, it makes a big difference. So, and that's what they have in Wagner. But I think Luvu is also embraces that. I think the other ones too. So this is going to pay major dividends for guys like Jordan McGee down the road, as well as Luvu. So I also think it's why this is getting ahead of myself. But man, if Bobby Wagner wants to keep playing, I don't know how you don't offer him a contract next year. But that's down the road. See where things go. But it's why that guy is so invaluable. And he even said that sometimes, like, you can watch at home on your iPad, and sometimes he'll do that. But he likes watching it on the laptop. He likes watching it, so that's at the facility, and that's why he comes in. But there's also benefit. Like, he can go talk to Joe Witt about, hey, this run series or this thing or these run packages, whatever it is, and they can talk together. And that's important because that communication led Wagner in the game the other day to make certain calls where he had to make a call on the field. So you got to think like a coach on the field, but he made the proper call. And it's because like that communication with Witt, which is what it's supposed to be. But to have a guy who like not only can communicate like that, but then make it in the heat of the moment, make the right one, get the guys in the right spot, and then have the play work. That's different. And so that's what the value of Wagner is. But all that communication stuff is partly why I think this defense is improving and why it can get a little bit better. Now, is it, they still there's still some holes there. We know that. But if you can do all these other things right, you're able to max out with what you do have and play better because of it. So, but again, like I think the secondary is doing well with it. Like I said, Quan Martin does well with that too. But I think having guys like Samerstill, and we've talked about this, like the part of the reason why he can move from inside to outside is because just how smart and competitive he is. Like, I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to say, I can't do that. Right. I think if they asked him to play linebacker, he'd probably say, okay, and he'd go learn it. But, because I don't think many guys that size stick their nose into the play as much as he does. And Igbenogany is like that as well, but not to the same level as Samerstill. But when you're smart and competitive, they can put you in a spot and they know they can at least trust those aspects. And then you communicate so you know what you're doing, whether or not you succeed in it, they know like he's going to play it right, and then gives you a better chance. So number 5, I think this will be a tougher game because it always is in the Meadowlands. Now, this is a different team, meaning Washington. So let's go back to that first game. I mean, it's 21-18. They moved up and down the field. Issues in the red zone. I think the Giants do enough on defense that are going to cause problems for Washington, enough to maybe keep that game closer than you would like. This is a game, get the W, get out of town, and keep moving. Like, could they blow them out? Sure. But the Giants have been playing teams close for the most part and they've done enough. They have enough that in areas that can hurt this team on defense, especially at the defensive ends with the pressure, that I could see this being more of a pain in the ass game than anything else. But they're a better team. They should win this game. We know that. Weird things happen in the Meadowlands, but that's the past. And I think when you look at this team, like they're not dealing with they're not haunted by the past. Like they're making their own little run at whatever history they want to create, right? But I do think that this could be a little bit of a problem. Like, consider this: like the Giants have scored 10 touchdowns this year. Three came against Washington in that first game. They didn't have a kicker to make the extra points, and they, the field goals, et cetera. So that certainly factored into the game. Commanders could have put that game away if they had handled the red zone better. We know that too. So there's that back and forth. If the Giants had this, well, if the Commanders had done that, if they don't have all these penalties, then you're looking at a different game. And so I think that's something to keep in mind too. Washington, here's a funny stat. Washington averages more points per game in the first half than the Giants do for an entire game. Daniel Jones has been awful in the Meadowlands. I think he has one touchdown pass there or something, or the team has one touchdown or one touchdown pass in the Meadowlands in the home games this year. Really kind of bad. Oh man. The Commanders had 8 runs of 10 plus yards in the first game. That's a season high allowed by the Giants. So now Brian Robinson had a few of those, and a couple of those in the short yardage situations. When he just kind of broke out of the pack. But I think they can run on this team, and that's to me what you need to do. In the last 4 weeks, some other numbers. Last 4 weeks, the Giants defense has allowed 6.2 yards per carry. 6.2 yards per carry. That's horrible. That's where Washington has to hurt them. And it's funny because the Giants have some good talent on that defensive line, but they're not a good run stopping defense. So, that talent starts with Dexter Lawrence, but I'll get to him in a minute. It's funny because the Commanders players love their run game, and they love what Cliff Kingsbury does. It's funny when you talk to these guys, like there's I don't say reverence, but it's like they really, when you have a coordinator who sells the game plan, and then you see on the field, like the confidence builds up that whatever you tell these guys you're going to do, they believe that it's going to work. And I've seen it before here with, it was Kyle, it was Sean McVay, and I think you're seeing this with Kingsbury. And I also think you're starting to see it with Joe Witt too. And I don't want to shortchange that guy at all, because like this is now a top half defense. And yeah, they've played some weaker offenses or teams or quarterbacks, but so do all these other teams that are in that ranking area. Like not many teams are playing high level quarterbacks all the time. And sometimes when you do, you rank a little bit lower. When you don't, you take advantage and you get up higher. But bottom line is, this is now a top half defense, and so they're in a really good spot because of that. And if you're a top half defense, you handle your business on Sunday. I think so there's a couple things that I think really work for this run game well, and why they feel like it so much. First of all, you have 5 guys in that line who can pull. And by the way, Brandon Coleman's going to play. Cornelius Lucas is not going to play. And for those wondering, Frankie Louvu was on the injury report this week. He's going to play. And any updates that may happen will be on Saturday, but there's nothing really that we have to really worry about unless something pops up out of nowhere. But Louvu will play, Lucas will not. And everybody else is going to be good to go. But they really like that they can have all 5 guys pull. It adds some diversity to how they're pulling action and what they do. That's one thing. And I also think, I was talking to one lineman who said that one of the keys for them is the way they practice. Now, because of CBA, teams cannot go out there and do all this padded work on the run game. And there's a belief that that's partly why the run game kind of faded. In addition, the quarterbacks becoming better and better, that it's harder to work on the run game because you need to work on that at a certain pace, right? And you need to be, like, ideally you're in full pads and doing it because you've got to work on your fits. You've got to work on you've got to get the contact on, you got to get the speed down to get to your spots, right? A little bit different than with pass protection, but this person was saying that the way they practice, they'll practice in the padded situation on Thursdays, and the O lineman, D lineman do go one-on-ones on Thursdays for about 5-6 minutes. So you get a couple reps of one-on-one. That helps a little bit, but that's mostly a pass set. But in the run game, he said that when they go, even when they're in not so much walkthrough, but just not even padded, that they practice at a certain speed. And if you practice at a certain speed, then you can play at a certain speed. But if you're not, if you're just going, if you're practicing at a, half speed or whatever, it's not gonna work for you as a run blocking unit. So this person felt like that partly what part of what they do well is they practice well. They practice at a good tempo, which then helps them in games. And that certainly you can say like what they're doing is working because the run game is pretty good. And it's not just Jaden Daniels that he matters, but their average yards per carry are higher. I think it's like 5.2 or 3 or something like that. And he's not averaging that many yards. The backs are. So their backs are among the best group in the NFL in terms of yards per carry. I think some of this stuff, they use a lot of motion. They use a lot of eye candy on that too after the snap. So the motion is always used with a purpose. I think that's one thing Kingsbury does very well is that motion with a purpose. And then, you see defenses get out of position. It creates better blocking angles for the lineman, allows them to get to guys. And then you're going to throw the eye candy with it, whether it's pulling action, tight end coming back, maybe a back going one way for a bubble, another back going another way with a handoff or the zone read, whatever it is, it works. It's harder to do all that stuff in the red zone. I think that's partly why there's a little bit of a struggle there at times. And I think, if you can't run the ball well down there, it's going to be difficult. I think if you have athletic ends, you can take away some of that zone read action that obviously with Jaden Daniels it likes to do. And I think the Giants have that. Like Burns and Thibodeau were really good at that. Ojulari, who replaced Thibodeau, is a good athlete. So if they defend that zone read well, then that means that the Brian Robinson or Eckler or whomever has got to produce in those areas. And so can they do that? Can they do all that without the eye candy and some of the other stuff? Well, they've got to show that. And they may have to show it this week because I think that, again, the Giants defense has had some issues, but I think that overall they can do some things with that secondary. And so they're going to make you drive and you're going to have to produce in the red zone because if you don't, it's going to be a similar game to last time. And Washington actually does have the most runs in the red zone. I think they're like middle of the pack in terms of yards per carry down in there. So to me, that's a big key. Can they produce down there? And there's an area where I think Jaden Daniels can get a little bit better. They're not a bad passing team down there, but you can get a little bit better. And I think, listen, I think you can also, but whatever, we'll get into that more later. So let's get to Dexter Lawrence now, because now I think he's a guy that's very important for this offense to defend. They've been moving him around a lot on the defensive line. He's a really, really good player. And he plays, as one person said, he plays high, but he plays with leverage. He's a big fella. He's like 340 pounds, listed as that. When you're listed at 340, usually you're a little bit more. So that becomes a challenge. And the challenge is because he does move around a lot more, not just over the center. He can play a little bit of three and move around on either side. So I think a lot of that interior is going to get a big tasting of him. They did a pretty good job with him in the first time. So that's good for them. The defensive ends are going to get upfield, very athletic. We know that. Burns and Ojulari. They don't blitz a lot, 12 times in the opener. I could see a situation like that. They've kind of been up and down with it. Some games it's 4 or 5 times, some games 11 or 12. One game I think it was a little bit more against Deshaun Watson, but that's because he can't move and their line isn't very good. So I could see something similar to what they did in the first time. Ojulari, and one of the ways is that these guys have tried to combat, if you remember, a lot of sideways, basically horizontal passing game. And, to McLaurin, to whomever, some bubbles, some screens, etc. So chipping the ends, I think, is a big deal here. I think Austin Eckler does a really good job at that. I think Luke McCaffrey does a really good job at that. Eckler, I think, does really well because he's lower and he comes up and he can pop you with the leverage and really knock you off. The tackles like it. As long as you know it's coming, they are good to react for it. Sometimes if you don't know it's coming, that guy could be blocked into a better angle to the quarterback, but they always do know it's coming. Ojulari has a really good get off when you watch him. He's got, I think it's 5 sacks in the last 3 weeks. He'll stand up, he'll put his hand in the dirt, gets into your pads quick. That's part of the thing, is gets in your hand pads quick and can get off that pretty quickly. So that's something you have to watch on the tackles, whether it's Coleman or Wiley. If you extend the play, he's a guy you want to watch out for, because that's something that, that's something they're going to have to watch for, is like, if you extend the play, when Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels obviously will extend the play, watch for Ojulari and make sure that he's taken care of, because he's a guy that can chase you down. He'll stunt once in a while, and et cetera. So there are times they're going to use 3 defensive tackles and 2 ends, again, almost like in a 3-4 look. And I think what you need to do is attack them in the run game. They're not big factors in that area. So I think that's where you can hurt them for sure. And Washington has the kind of run game that can do it. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about how these guys practice in the run game and all that is that the way they coach the scout team and how they want a really good look from the scout team, and they tend to get it. So they want guys to move the way that the other team's going to move in a game. So they'll get the scout team and they'll scout the scout team and or scout the other team and pass that information to the scout team to give them a better look, just so they're not just out there in a spot. And so that way they react the way the Giants defense, for example, would react. And so if you get that, you get a better look. If you're not coaching them well, then you're not going to get that. But they feel like that scout team is coached pretty well, which then helps to prepare for the game. So anyways, let's get to the other thing is the Giants are a heavy zone team with their defense and backs in the past. You remember they were a lot more man. And so I think, the defensive backs have been getting better. Deonte Banks has been having some problems. He likes to talk. He likes playing against these guys and loves to run his mouth against these guys. But he's been playing very consistent. I think he's the kind of guy that if you can create a negative play for him early, you're going to take his head out of the game. That's what I think the belief or the hope is. So, and then safety Jordan Pinnock is a good playmaker for them in the secondary. Giants offense, it's Tyrone Tracy, man. That he's been a really good running back for them. He was in the concussion protocol. He's going to play. He is really good and patient and pressing the hole and cutting back and playing with vision as a running back. So he can get through there. He had a 45-yard touchdown, I think, against the Steelers last week, where it was all about that patience, visions, cut. He's good at that. So watch for that. You need to make sure that there's not a good cutback lane because he'll take advantage of that. And he's certainly moved ahead of Singletary, as Jordan Ronan told you when he was on the podcast the other day. Malik Neighbors, they're going to get the ball to him, and so do they. And the one thing, it's funny because I was talking to someone, they said they didn't want to say exactly what, because you're not going to tell me the game plan for him, but there are tells to when they were going to get him the ball. Now, some of the tell is he's on the field. They're going to force him the ball, but they're going to get him the ball in a lot of different ways. And it could be off jet. It could be off of screens. It could be off down the field. But the big key, and I'm talking to St. Just about this, the key is you got to tackle him, because Mike Davis had a couple of times in that first game, didn't tackle him. Those extra yards hurt. And the problem is they get him the ball so much that one time could be the difference. So if they get him the ball 10 times, like you may tackle him really well 8 times, 9 times, that 10th time he could get you. So you really need to be on alert for that all the time, because otherwise he's going to really hurt them. Again, there are a couple of times like he hurt him on some crossers. Well, one time St. Just bumps into Bobby Wagner. They had a little collision. And that's something he said after that game, they got it cleaned up. So he doesn't think that's going to be an issue, but you've got to make sure, because they will try him on some crossers too. And sometimes you can just have a linebacker on the other side of that crosser, just kind of buying time for the corner to catch back up, because he's going to run away from them if that's the case. Let's see what else we got here. The misses were a big deal for them. And I think if you don't get that cleared up, like the Giants line is a mess, and you've got to take advantage. I do like how this D line is starting to play. I like, it's funny because they don't have the big name flashy ends, but I like what they're doing. I really like how Dorrance Armstrong's played, Dante Fowler, Cleveland Farrell. I think they're at a good place for that, but they've got to make sure that they do not get the weird stuff that happens up in New York happens because they always put themselves in a hole early in the game, and it has translated from one coach to the other. This is a different organization, a different time. I think you have different players and a different mindset. So I don't think it's going to be this, oh no, what's going on in the Meadowlands again, but take care of business early. This is a team that the fan base is down on them. Take them out early. If you do that, things will be okay. I do think they're going to walk away fine, but it may be more of a pain in the butt game than you like. Again, you got a score prediction. You got what you think is going to happen. Leave it in the comments on the YouTube page. Let me know. And if you get it right, we'll talk about, I'll mention it on the air, give you a shout out. Anyway, that's it for me, folks. Appreciate you tuning in, and enjoy Sunday. Talk to you after the game.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.